Welcome to another episode of Out of the Bubble. I hope you've all had a great week and are ready for another dose of inspiration. This week we have Lucy McCarraher. Lucy is a published author and now helps other women get their story out in published books with Rethink Press and be able to kind of champion women who have got expertise that need to share their story. Her attitude towards life and career changes and reinvention is quite inspiring, and with a long list of different directions that she has just gone with the flow, and you never know where it leads to. So I hope you find lots of motivation and inspiration in this week's story. I'd also like to mention, before we get started, things that have been going on behind the scenes with Out of the Bubble this month. So I have finally got around to getting out my Patreon site. It's something that I've really wanted to do for quite a long time, and I'm as guilty as everybody else about learning to own their story and put their head above the parapet. I love producing Out of the Bubble podcasts. I really enjoy it, and I love making all these connections and sharing these inspiring stories. For the price of a coffee, for once a month, you could provide some extra support for Out of the Bubble to be able to grow even further, reach more women, and share all these fantastic ladies' stories. So if you'd like to become a patron, then please go check out the website, and I will leave the show notes at the end of this podcast. Sit back, grab a copy, and enjoy. So good morning, Lucy. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Rachel. It's lovely to be here.
So, as I said in my introduction, we have got so much to talk about this morning because you've had such an interesting career and really quite varied. But how do you describe yourself to people now?
I describe myself now as an author, a publisher, and a mentor of book writing. So that sort of sums it up. That's the quick version.
And you have, you've not always been in the kind of author arena, have you? But you have always had that passion for writing. But where did it all begin?
Well, I suppose it all began when I was a child, and I don't really know why. I suppose both my parents wrote books, but not kind of non-fiction books. And I always wanted actually to be a novelist. That was my kind of childhood ambition. I sort of saw myself being, I don't know, Jane Austen or one of the Brontes sitting in the country writing novels. But that didn't happen at all for a very long time. But I did start in publishing. I went to Australia with my first husband, and because he was taking up a university lectureship there, and we were very into theatre at the time, and we started a monthly theatre magazine, which was kind of a mad thing to do, but we managed to run it for the 8 years that we lived there. And so that was actually an incredibly good grounding in publishing, because it was such a long time ago that it was before anything was online. Everything was, sort of physical. We had, sheets to proof, and it was all, but it was very, very useful grounding. And it also gave me a position, an expertise that I actually didn't have at all to begin with in terms of Australian theatre, and led to me to become a TV presenter, have my own TV show on arts and entertainment, and be a journalist for other papers, journals, magazines and things too. So it's very interesting how, something that starts out small develops into all sorts of other opportunities, basically.
Yeah, you see, that's what I love about this story, is the fact that, you were just open to different opportunities that come along. And I think that's one of the things that I try and encourage women through the Out of the Bubble, is to just embrace change and to say yes to things, because you just don't know where it's going to lead to.
No, exactly. And I suppose, on the downside, I've never had a career path. I've never had really specific goals other than wanting to be an author. But on the other side of that, I've been open to everything that's come up, and my tendency has been to say yes to things, even if I had no clue how to do them. I just thought, I'd like to do that. I'll learn it as I go. And generally that's worked out pretty well.
So during that period of time when you were doing the magazine and you were doing presenting, there must have been times when you really struggled to kind of overcome some of those hurdles of imposter syndrome. And how did you kind of keep pushing yourself forward?
Well, I suppose, a lot of it is just the need to go on, and just not to be able to not do something when you're there and you put yourself in that position. I remember one time when I was doing an interview of a quite famous Australian actor, And I think it was the first interview I'd done for the TV show, and the camera crew didn't turn up. And it was just the most terrifying thing. I mean, I didn't know him. It was, I mean, luckily they did turn up in the end, but by the time they got there, I was a sort of gibbering mess, basically, not knowing what to do. And you know, I should think the interview was pretty awful, but I did do it. But I was literally ill with stress for a couple of days after that. It was hard. So it's just a question of pushing on through. And then, you know, the next time I felt more confident, and that's the way it goes, really.
So when you came back from Australia, had you come back with a plan to what, you know, because obviously you set up a life in Australia and then you come back, it's almost like having to start again. Yes, so what came next?
Well, I mean, again, that was really an open book, because we came back because my father was ill, and also I was pregnant with our second child at that stage. So we just sort of kind of for family reasons had to be back, and we had nothing to come back to. So it was a question of setting up a whole new sort of life, really. And we started a business making what we then called video books, which literally had not been done before. They were things like we did, I mean, this took a couple of years to set up, and it was a kind of financially terrifying process. But we made a series of what we called, as I say, video books, which were recipes with Prue Leith, gardening with Alan Titchmarsh. We did how to buy a used car with Eric Idle, a whole series of sort of factual how-to DIY videos, which had literally never been done before. That was the kind of, you know, again, as I say, it's so long ago, that hadn't been done. And we also, I don't think I've told you this before, Rachel, we also did a video series called The Lover's Guide, which was sex education for adults and extremely explicit. But it was an absolute bestseller in the kind of, I think this was the late 90s. And it actually got BBFC, the British Board of Film Classification. I don't know I can't remember what classification it was, but no other explicit sex videos had ever got that before, because this was genuinely educational. So that was an interesting series of video books to make.
I love the fact that you push so many different boundaries. I love the fact that you've done so many different, you've tackled things head on. I think it's fantastic.
Yes, well, it was, as I say, it was all kind of, you know, just kind of like ideas that came out of other ideas and developed, you know, sort of making contacts and doing things in a fairly unplanned sort of way, but just taking things as they came.
So after the video books, what came next?
After the video books, that was also kind of the end of my first marriage, and I stepped away from the video making and the company, and I again accidentally fell into something that was then became known, and you know, we know it so well today, called work-life balance, but there literally was no name for it then, or not a fixed name. So though it was called things like family-friendly working, and it was kind of all kind of around mothers mostly at the point, and then it became a sort of, as I say, family-friendly working, and it had all sorts of other weird names like time sovereignty and things, but eventually it started being called work-life balance. And this happened because I went to work as a promotions kind of PR person for a couple of voluntary organizations around parenting, and they were very kind of they were really pushing that kind of flexible working at the time. And so funnily enough, that was where I ended up getting my first publishing contract, because I was doing a lot of research with all sorts of different companies and businesses and government departments and organizations. And a publisher approached me to write a book on work-life balance. In fact, two books, one for sort of personal use, which was called the Book of Balanced Living, and another one for corporates, that was the Work-Life Manual, and how companies and businesses could actually be better organized, make more money, retain people, recruit people if they had flexible working. And weirdly, although, you know, I've been pushing this for at least 20 years, it's now, because of the pandemic, become something that everybody is saying, oh, that's a good idea, that could work.
Yeah, you need to get your books back out there, don't you, to remind people. But isn't it, I mean, doesn't that say a lot that it's taken that long to actually get it out there in the mainstream conversation and to see how it is, it's a workable solution for everybody's better well-being, and the fact that it's just been kind of so hard to drag it into the 21st century, hasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It's to do with that kind of managerial mindset where, you know, managers and, you know, right down from the top, from CEOs down, feel they have to be in charge of people and seeing people and making sure that they are in the office. It's you know, and that kind of controlling way, which doesn't make people on the whole feel happy or productive or often want to stay with organizations. And it's very strange that, you know, although I ran lots of pilots in all sorts of organizations in different teams, and every time the results showed that, you know, the business would get more out of their employees, as well as their employees having a much better time. It still didn't kind of, you know, really get through into the general understanding.
Yeah. Do you think it is that's quite a male attitude as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
that they want that control, and they find it difficult to see outside the box of how else it could be.
Yeah, I think there is certainly. I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, all men were like that or all women are not, but yes, on the whole, I think you know, that work has been set up in that sort of way for so long that it is a kind of, I think it is a kind of male control thing, and not understanding that, you know, it's about the outcomes. It doesn't matter if you do your work at 4 o'clock in the morning, as long as what you produce is what's needed, and, you know, there's enough of it, and it's, you know, it's what you've agreed to do.
Yeah. Are your books still available? Can you buy them? Are they still put?
I think you can get. I think they are on Amazon. I think you can get second-hand copies, but they're not actually in print from the publisher anymore. No.
Right.
And they probably need rewriting, so I'm not kind of really not to go and buy them. They're quite old now.
So how long did you stay there?
So I guess I was doing that for probably around 10 years, maybe. It's sort of kind of, yes, I was probably the best part of a decade was kind of, you know, I was specializing in work-life balance and working for, you know, really interesting organizations like Virgin and Microsoft, and some of the big banks like HSBC and Lloyd's, and then government departments and sort of city councils, but also with very small businesses as well, because the EU was giving out grants for work-life balance. So I got to do pilots with, you know, a lot of small organisations as well. And it was interesting that the basic tenets of what we were saying held for any size organisation if you worked in teams. And got people to got everybody involved, and you know, seeing people as individuals, everybody with their own needs, not just about parents and parenting. It's about everybody having their own you know, needs outside work, and being able to fit work around those and finding a comfortable way to do it.
It'll be really interesting to see what happens now after the pandemic, when it does kind of, life does get back to some kind of normality next year, whether this carries forward and they push for change. It'll be an interesting time, won't it?
Yeah, indeed. Whether it all falls back into the same old, or whether actually we've moved on now.
Yes, yeah. So talking of moving on now, that's the next phase. So you obviously love doing that job. So you then embrace change and move to do something completely different again.
I did. Well, it kind of, where I am now is in publishing, but what publishing and writing and business books particularly, but what actually got me into that was fiction, because having published, having had a book published, a non-fiction book published, it suddenly made me think, actually, I can write books. I could do this, and it also gave me a chance. I mean, just having a book published that positions you as an expert in your field, means that you get more work and you get better paid for that work. And so I had a kind of, I was able to kind of take a little time and think about, you know, could I write a novel? What would I write about? And I had actually at that point recently also adopted a little girl, my daughter, from Russia, from a Russian children's
how
home.
lovely.
Which was, well, yeah, I've got 2 of them now. Well, they're sort of grown up now, but yes, it was an extraordinary process. And I thought there's something in there. I am somebody who's in the rare and rather lucky position of having 2 birth children from my first marriage, and actually two adopted children. And for most people, it's one or the other. But actually, I thought it was, this is a really interesting comparison and something to talk about. So I came up with this idea of writing a novel called Blood and Water, as in which is thicker. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be really creative here. I'm just going to write this. I'm not going to be told what to write. I'm just going to, which I had rather been with the work-life balance book, I'm just going to pour everything out and get in the flow and, write this book, write a novel and see what happens. And I did, and I really loved doing it. It was such fun. And I just really enjoyed the writing process. And when I'd written a first draft, I thought, oh yeah, this is great. I sent it off to an agent I knew, a writer's agent. And within a couple of weeks, she had got back to me, and I opened the letter thinking, oh, this is it. And she said, "Dear Lucy, thank you for sending me your manuscript. It's both boring and unbelievable." So I was like, oh, no, really? This is my life. How can it be unbelievable? But she made the extremely good and salutary point to me that actually it had no structure, and it didn't, and life is not what you expect from fiction. It's no good just sort of saying and then this happened and that happened. Fiction is something you write with a structure. So I went back and thought about it, and I did kind of whine about it to her a bit first, but and I thought, yeah, she's absolutely right. So I went back and I actually created a really complicated structure with characters and plots and subplots, and sort of based on the same idea, but with a very different plan to the whole thing. And I wrote a couple of chapters, and I showed it to a few people who said, yeah, actually this is quite good. And then I just left it and went back to doing work-life balance work. And then a couple of years later, I think it was, Richard and Judy started their book club.
Yeah.
And they started it with a novel competition, and they were just asking anybody to send in a summary and a first chapter of a novel, and they would publish the best one. And a few people said to me, oh, go on, send yours in. And I thought, oh no, I'm bound to lose. It's not worth the effort. And then suddenly, literally the day before the entries closed, I thought, yeah, okay, I might as well. So I tidied it up, turned the 3 chapters into one and sent it in. Heard nothing for absolutely ages. And then about 6 months later, long after the deadline, I got a letter from Macmillan, who were the sponsoring publisher. And they said, thanks for, you didn't win. And I thought, no, fine, nice of you to say so. But they said, we've had 47,000 entries, so it's taken a bit longer than we expected. We're publishing the winner, but there were also 10 other books that we really would like to publish, and yours was one of them.
That's
Could
amazing.
you send the rest to us? Which was, yeah, really amazing. But there was no book. That was all I'd written, the 2 chapters. So I had to go back to them and say, how long would you give me to finish writing my book? So I actually stopped work for 4 months and just wrote this novel, sent it into them, and they published it. And that was, just so fantastic. However, I will say I have not turned into J.K. Rowling. I did write 2 more books. But they didn't obviously give me much of an income. And then I was going to write a 4th book, which was about women using different kinds of self-help. But then as I was working on that, I decided that I actually needed to write the self-help book and not the novel. So I did that and I found a partner, writing partner, co-author, to write that with. And we wrote a self-help book, which was called The Real Secret. And it was published by a small publisher called Bookshaker, that was run by a guy called Joe Gregory. And it turned out he actually lived quite near me, and we met at a networking event, and I started then working for him as his commissioning editor. And then we started a new company together called Rethink Press, and Rethink Press is what I do now. 10 years later, it started literally with just the two of us, and we now have an international team of 40. Last year we published 75 business books. And it's all kind of taken off from there. So this is my latest incarnation. It's me as a publisher. And I've also written another 9 books in the meantime, mostly about writing books. Started the Business Book Awards. And so, yeah, that's what I am and what I do now. And,
well, you don't stop, do you, Lucy?
No, I've got no plans to stop.
Well, it's interesting that the publishing house that you're running now is, because I think lots of people have aspirations of writing a book, and lots of women find it really quite daunting, and it's quite a daunting arena to know where to start. And I think there's a real feeling of you either go to a big publisher or that you self-publish, and there's nothing in between. But you actually fill that gap of the in-between market, don't you? So can you describe a little bit more about how it works?
Yes, absolutely. So as you say, there are, those are the two extremes. And Rethink Press has been positioned to help entrepreneurs or business owners or coaches or consultants who want to have a good book out there, want to have it published well, but have probably a niche market, so they're not likely to get a contract from a traditional publisher who needs to make their money back on sales of books. So we have created a whole system that produces books that are at least as good, I think, as traditional published books, and a lot better than most self-published books, although of course the odd one is wonderful. But the business model is different. So what happens is the author pays for the publishing services, so the editing, the cover design, and the interior and the proofreading and the project management of putting their book through the production process, which is actually incredibly time consuming if you are running a business, and publishing is not your area of expertise. It's much more complicated than people think. So you pay for that, but the end result is that you get a book that you can use as a business card, as a lead generator, as an authority piece, as something to show the media, to get speaking gigs with. And so you make the return on your investment in your book, not through individual one-by-one retail sales of the book, although we have some authors who sell really well, but actually through getting clients, through being able to raise your fees, grow your business using your book as a central business tool.
And have you seen an increase in women coming forward to do this? Because I think women are notoriously bad in business of owning their skill set and being able to put their hands up and say, yeah, I can do this, and this is my speciality. But have you seen an increase in women coming forward to want to get their work
I
out?
have seen an increase, but a lot of it is to do with me partly at least to do with me pushing that increase, because I founded the Business Book Awards to kind of celebrate these kind of authors and publishing in 2017. And despite setting up a very egalitarian, I thought, 50-50 women and men judging panel, and all the criteria seemed to be very open to me. We got a third of the entries were from women and 2/3 were from men authors. And then in the first year, every single winner was a white man. which was, I mean, they wrote brilliant books, they were great authors, nothing against them at all, but somehow we had created a system that that rewarded the men and not the women for their work. So I set up a kind of well, I wrote a book about it called A Book of One's Own, and did some research into why women were not writing so many books, and tried to persuade a lot more women to write their business books and claim their authority. And I think just by putting the word out that, you know, yes, you could do it, and, you know, it's important to do it, and it will help your business. And actually, you're absolutely right that women have less confidence in general about putting themselves out there and saying, yes, I'm good at what I do. But actually the book will do that for you. It's kind of, you know, it's a way in without you having to go and say, hey, I'm fantastic, and sell yourself. The book is so good that it just goes out there. All you need to do is, you know, give away a lot of copies of your book, and things will immediately start to happen, and boost you and your business, and, you know, you claim your area of expertise. So yes, I run programs for women to plan and write their business books, and, you know, help them through the process. And we work in groups because that's how women seem to really enjoy and feel supported by other women.
So you run a Facebook group, don't you?
I do, yes. It's called ABU, which is the acronym for A Book of One's Own. And yeah, anybody, any woman who's interested in writing or indeed reading their book, or has written their book, do come and look for it, and join us there. It'd be great.
I must admit, I've had a look, and I've just joined, and I think it is that fear of the unknown and stepping out of your own comfort zone, isn't it? To think, okay, well, I'm going to get my story out there and use my expertise. But I think it's so important that we do get all these, you know, specialists and women out there using their voices and being heard. But what's interesting is I haven't really thought about it from a point of view of how it can really help your marketing as a business, because it's like you said, you can get speaking events, and it kind of lifts your profile, I guess, doesn't it? And I hadn't thought about it that way at all.
Yes, that's absolutely what it's about. And I think, you know, the more women that do that and say, I mean, writing a book is a kind of gender neutral way of you know, getting yourself out there. There's nothing, you know, sort of that says that only men can do this or only women can do this. And by the way, we've now kind of upped the amount of entries and winners in the Business Book Awards for women's books.
Yeah.
But yes, no, I mean, that is what most of my authors are. Authors at Rethink Press, and the authors who I coach through, that's what I help them to do, to really position their books so it's absolutely targeted at their ideal clients, that it's there to showcase what they do, often their processes, or if they have a model that they follow or a framework that they take people through, to give a good view of their interpretation of their industry and what their thoughts are, but also pepper it through with lots of case studies, not testimonials from your clients, but case studies that display to everybody what you do for your clients and how your interventions, whatever you do, are really positive and work on the ground. And that's what really puts you out there as an expert and sells you. And also, as you say, tell your own story through the process of writing your book as well, because that's what really engages people with you, to know that you've been through you know, ups and downs, definitely not just all the successes, but, you know, where you failed, where you've had learning journeys as well. And that really gets people coming back to you and saying, yeah, you really understand this, don't you? I would like to work with you. I've read your book. And for some people that will be enough.
Yeah.
But for your ideal clients, they will be the ones who come back and say, please help me with this. I know I need your input.
Yeah. So what's next for you? Are you still writing books? Have you got the Lucy
Yes.
book that you still want to get out?
I've just written a new book with my business partner Joe Gregory called Book Builder, which is a complete update on the way we take authors through the planning and writing process to get their book before they come to publishing. So ideally for us at Rethink Press, we really want to work with authors from the very start when their book's just an idea in their head. And then we can take them through getting the book planned out in huge detail, because that's the important thing. If you start writing without a plan, unlike my career, it will all go haywire. But that's definitely the way to write a book. And then taking them through the writing process, which again is, it's not easy. I would never pretend it's not hard work and doesn't take time. It does. But if you do it with support and with help and with a process, you're much more likely to reach the end of it.
So how can people find out more about it? What's the websites?
The website is rethinkpress.com. Actually, we're just having it updated, and the new program isn't quite out yet, and the new book isn't quite out yet, but it will be soon. But please do come to rethinkpress.com and see us there. And you can email us at info@rethinkpress.com. Or you can find me on social media and
yes, I'll put all your links on your social media platform at the end of this as well. Thank you so much. You are such an interesting lady to talk to, because I love the fact that you have had a very fluid attitude to what comes next in life, and I'm sure this is not the end of your journey. I'm sure you'll be going on to do lots of different things. So I look forward to finding out what comes next, Lucy. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today. I've got 2 last questions to ask you that I ask most of my guests. So what's the best piece of advice you've been given along the way?
I think that, well, one of the best pieces of advice that I was given in terms of writing was be kind to your readers, which is an interesting one, because actually you need to write a book that's easy to read, that's pleasurable to read, and not something that's really complicated. And so that's a sort of specific piece of advice. But I think the other piece of advice, and a piece of advice that I would give to people is just stay open. Stay, don't get fixated on goals. Stay open to the possibilities that come to you, because it might be much better than anything you ever thought of yourself.
Yeah, that's so true. I love that. And women are notoriously bad at accepting compliments. So I now ask all my guests what compliment you would give yourself.
Oh, you asked me.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
I think the compliment I'd give myself is possibly, you're always a bit better than you thought you were going to be. So just accept that you're not too bad. Actually, you're okay, and you manage to inspire people to do things that they didn't think they were going to be able to, and that's what makes me happiest. So if I can do that, I'll take that as a compliment.
Brilliant. That's lovely, Lucy. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to connect with you, and I will definitely be staying in touch, and I'm really enjoying the book. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. That was great, Lucy. Thank you so much. You're so interesting. You've done so many different things.
I thought, when I sort of talk it through, I think, God, I'm completely mad. What a ridiculous life I've had.
No, I love it. I love it. It's really good. And I think so many people will listen to it and think, God, it just makes people realise that you don't have to stay on one career path all your life. You can make changes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose, what I could have said was that, look, I'm 65. I started my last company 10 years ago, and I'm, definitely don't think I'm done yet. So, so don't give up at any point, really. I could have said that as the advice, but anyway.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. And let's keep in touch.
Rachel.
And
I'll definitely.
I'll check out the Facebook group. I joined it, so I'll see you.
Great.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you so much, Lucy. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Bubble. I hope you've all had a great week and are ready for another dose of inspiration. This week we have Lucy McCarraher. Lucy is a published author and now helps other women get their story out in published books with Rethink Press, and be able to kind of champion women who have got expertise that need to share their story. Her attitude towards life and career changes and reinvention is quite inspiring, and with a long list of different directions that she has just gone with the flow, and you never know where it leads to. So I hope you find lots of motivation and inspiration in this week's story. I'd also like to mention, before we get started, things that have been going on behind the scenes with Out of the Bubble this month. So I have finally got around to getting out my Patreon site. It's something that I've really wanted to do for quite a long time, and I'm as guilty as everybody else about learning to own their story and put their head above the parapet. I love producing Out of the Bubble podcasts. I really enjoy it, and I love making all these connections and sharing these inspiring stories. For the price of a coffee, for once a month, you could provide some extra support for Out of the Bubble to be able to grow even further, reach more women, and share all these fantastic ladies' stories. So if you'd like to become a patron, then please go check out the website, and I will leave the show notes at the end of this podcast. Sit back, grab a copy, and enjoy.